I remember the evening my fiancé, Shane, stomped into our apartment, his face red and his voice shaking with fury. We'd been engaged only a few months, but I had never seen him so unhinged. He tossed his work bag on the floor and glared at me, mumbling about how they had dared to do it again. I didn't know who they were or what exactly had happened, so I sat him down on the couch. That's when he told me about the humiliating award ceremony his boss, Rhonda, had sprung on him despite his request for no public praise. He'd warned Rhonda repeatedly that he loathed public attention, explaining how past experiences had made him uncomfortable with displays of praise. She seemed to understand until she blindsided him at work. They'd gathered his entire team, ordered a cake, and presented him with a plaque. Shane reacted with anger instead of gratitude, glaring at everyone before walking out. That afternoon, he told me, "I said I never wanted an award show. Now they're treating me like a child who needs applause." I could see how humiliated he felt. He believed Rhonda had violated his trust and crossed an unbreakable line. Over the next week, Shane's workplace became tense. Rumors circulated about his furious exit. Rhonda tried to smooth things over, but Shane was uninterested in mending fences. He kept conversations minimal, refusing even her attempts at private apologies. "Words mean nothing," he said. "If she cared, she would have respected my boundaries." I worried about his job. He was a brilliant project manager, beloved for his expertise, but his attitude now threatened to alienate everyone. I suggested he speak to human resources, but he just shook his head. "They're all in on it," he insisted, convinced he'd been deliberately set up. When rumors of a possible promotion surfaced, Shane assumed his stellar performance would outweigh any lingering tension. He'd led successful projects, delivered results on time, and maintained impeccable client satisfaction. Word around the office suggested that a new senior project manager position was opening. People believed he was the logical choice. However, the day came when the announcement named someone else, Damon, a younger colleague Shane had mentored. Stunned, Shane approached Rhonda, who delivered a rehearsed explanation. "Damon has demonstrated strong leadership qualities." Shane seethed, certain his refusal to accept that public award had cost him the promotion he deserved. That night, he came home livid, ranting about betrayal and favoritism. I tried to soothe him, reminding him that he could look for opportunities elsewhere, but he wouldn't hear it. "It's the principle," he snapped. "I've given them everything, and they trampled my dignity." He flung his jacket across the room, pacing back and forth. I'd never seen him so consumed with anger. He muttered about legal action, threatening a lawsuit for retaliation. I suggested he calm down and gather evidence first, but he ignored me. "They're messing with the wrong guy," he said, eyes dark with unwavering determination. As tensions at work escalated, Shane's relationship with Damon soured too. Damon attempted a polite approach, claiming he never sought to overshadow Shane, yet Shane refused any civil conversation, believing Damon had backstabbed him. When an internal memo circulated, listing Damon's responsibilities, Shane exploded. He confronted Rhonda in the hallway, calling her a liar and accusing her of orchestrating a smear campaign against him. The atmosphere became untenable. Shane came home one night, tossed his laptop onto the couch, and declared he'd resigned. "I refuse to let them disrespect me anymore," he said, shaking with both rage and sorrow. Suddenly, he was out of work, and our future plans wavered. We had hoped to combine finances for a new home after the wedding, but now everything felt uncertain. Shane insisted it was temporary. He'd find a better position, maybe even sue his former employer for damages. "They owe me," he insisted. In the meantime, he gave up his own small condo to save on costs, opting to crash on my couch. I offered him the spare room, but he refused, saying he didn't want to disrupt my routine. Still, it felt strange seeing my fiancé in such a precarious state. At first, I tried to be supportive. I believed his rage would subside once he got back on his feet. But every day, Shane sank deeper into resentment. He spent hours scanning job boards and reading legal forums, searching for angles to punish his old company. Nights turned into sleepless marathons of drafting demand letters and compiling evidence of perceived slights. He slammed coffee cups onto the table, mumbled curses at Rhonda's name, and bristled at any suggestion that he move on. I worried about his mental health, afraid that his bitterness would consume him before he found a path forward. He found a lawyer willing to explore a potential lawsuit, but it wasn't the slam dunk Shane hoped for. The attorney explained the need for concrete evidence of retaliation. A meltdown over a public award wouldn't automatically guarantee a win. Shane bristled at the advice to maintain composure. "I can't pretend to be okay with what they did," he spat. Nonetheless, he proceeded with an initial consultation, handing over emails, texts, and corporate memos he believed showed a pattern of disrespect. When the lawyer expressed caution, Shane felt betrayed again. He muttered, "Seems like everyone's in bed with that damn company." Financial stress soon followed. My paycheck barely covered rent, utilities, and groceries. Shane contributed when he could, but his savings dwindled. He applied for jobs, yet rumors spread fast in the local tech scene, and no offers materialized. He blamed Rhonda for ruining his reputation. I started picking up freelance work, trying to keep us afloat. Meanwhile, Shane's fixation on revenge intensified. If anyone suggested moving forward, he saw it as disloyalty. "I won't forgive betrayal," he'd say, his voice razor sharp. It was as though the Shane I fell in love with had been replaced by a man consumed by anger. One morning, I awoke to find him hunched over his laptop, eyes bloodshot. He'd been researching corporate legal cases all night. "They've messed with the wrong man," he said quietly. He'd discovered a clause in his employment contract that could hint at wrongful termination, even though he'd technically resigned. His attorney was skeptical, but Shane insisted on pressing forward. When I voiced concern, he snapped, "You should be on my side. Don't you want justice?" I tried reminding him that justice wouldn't pay our bills, but he glared at me as if I were betraying him just like everyone else. He filed the lawsuit, citing constructive discharge, emotional distress, and retaliatory exclusion from advancement. The firm responded aggressively, denying every allegation. Their lawyers targeted Shane's outburst during the award ceremony, calling him volatile and unfit for leadership. It was a painful process, with depositions revealing emails from coworkers who found Shane's behavior intimidating. Even though I believed he had a valid complaint, the mounting evidence that painted him as difficult was hard to ignore. Still, Shane remained resolute, fueled by righteous indignation. His attorney warned him to expect personal scrutiny on the stand, but Shane declared he had nothing to hide. A pre-trial mediation session was scheduled, meant to avoid a lengthy courtroom battle. I accompanied Shane, hoping for a settlement that might let us reclaim normalcy. But negotiations soured quickly. The company's representatives offered a modest sum, contingent on a non-disclosure agreement. Shane refused, demanding a formal apology and a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. The lawyers laughed, which only inflamed him. He stormed out, vowing to drag them through a public trial. I felt a mix of dread and admiration at his refusal to accept compromise. He valued his self-respect above all else, even if it meant risking everything. Back at home, the tension between us grew. Our conversations revolved around his court case or his anger at Damon's betrayal. He refused to consider that Damon might simply have been promoted for being more adaptable. "He stabbed me in the back," Shane insisted, convinced Damon had spoken negatively about him behind closed doors. Late one night, Shane discovered an old group email implying Damon supported Rhonda's public award idea. That was all the proof Shane needed to brand Damon a traitor. "I mentored that guy," he muttered bitterly. "No forgiveness for betrayal, none. I hope he regrets ever crossing me." The trial date loomed, intensifying Shane's obsession. He spent sleepless nights compiling documents, practicing testimonies, and dissecting every possible argument. Gregory, his lawyer, tried to temper his client's fury, but Shane was unstoppable. He believed he was fighting a moral crusade, and that anyone not fully aligned with him was an enemy. Our wedding plans had withered, replaced by court deadlines and legal fees. My own emotions vacillated between empathy for his situation and frustration at his inability to see beyond revenge. When I broached the topic of our future, he brushed me off, saying, "This is our future, me winning." On the morning of the trial, Shane wore his best suit, a grim determination etched into his face. I sat in the gallery, stomach twisted in knots. The company's representatives arrived with thick binders and an air of calm superiority. Damon was there too, avoiding Shane's glare. Rhonda, stoic, nodded politely to her attorneys. Opening statements framed Shane as a victim of corporate retaliation, but the defense countered by highlighting his disruptive outbursts. They alleged he'd made colleagues uncomfortable, undermining the company culture. Shane fumed at each accusation, arms folded tight. I could almost taste the tension permeating the room. When Damon testified, he described Shane as a brilliant technician but a rigid personality. He insisted that management valued Shane's skills, yet worried about his leadership approach. Shane seethed, whispering lies under his breath. Damon admitted Shane had helped him grow, but claimed the award incident showed how poorly Shane handled public acknowledgement. It was a stark portrayal of Shane as thin-skinned and prone to hostility. My fiancé glowered, fists clenched beneath the table. I watched him wrestle with shock and anger. Damon's words felt like a gut punch, a stark reminder that personal grudges wouldn't disappear simply through legal channels. Next, Rhonda took the stand, describing how she intended the award as recognition for Shane's excellent work. She seemed genuinely baffled by his fury, alleging she had wanted to boost his morale. Shane's lawyer tried to portray her actions as deliberate provocation, but Rhonda insisted she never meant harm. The defense produced emails where Shane flatly refused team-building activities, painting him as unwilling to collaborate. Watching Shane's face contort, I recognized how deeply he felt this betrayal. The question hung in the air: was this truly retaliation, or simply a clash between Shane's unwavering pride and a company's public culture? At the close of testimonies, Shane took the stand, recounting how he felt cornered and humiliated by the surprise ceremony. He described a pattern of disrespect, culminating in a rigged promotion process. He spoke passionately, voice cracking at times, about boundaries and dignity. Yet, under cross-examination, the defense highlighted instances where Shane had refused to attend corporate events or even basic staff meetings. They argued that a leadership role demanded public engagement, something Shane clearly detested. When asked if he regretted his outburst, Shane refused to back down, insisting he was justified. The jury watched, faces inscrutable, absorbing every word. After closing arguments, I waited with Shane for the verdict, nerves on edge. He sat upright, jaw clenched, still convinced he'd win. The jury returned, looking solemn. The foreperson declared the company not liable for retaliation. They found no conclusive link between the award incident and Shane's missed promotion. Instead, they believed his poor attitude and hostility had influenced management's decision. My heart sank seeing Shane's face fall. He stood motionless, a statue of disbelief. The judge dismissed the case, leaving Shane with nothing. All those sleepless nights, all that anger, had culminated in a single, devastating defeat. In the aftermath, Shane refused to speak to reporters, refusing even my comfort. Gregory tried offering condolences, but Shane stormed out of the courtroom. Later that evening, he paced around my living room, vowing payback. "They'll regret this," he hissed. "I'm not through." Fear clutched my chest. I knew that look. He was past reason, driven by vengeance. Over the following days, he combed through old company files, rummaging for anything incriminating. "I'm going to take them down," he said, face pale with exhaustion. I begged him to let go, to start anew, but he couldn't. Betrayal, in his mind, demanded consequences. One night, I woke to the glow of his laptop. Shane had hacked into the company's internal server, pulling confidential financial data. He claimed he found evidence of embezzlement tied to Damon's projects. I froze, horrified at the illegality of it. "They deserve this," he growled. "They tried to destroy me." He compiled spreadsheets, emails, and suspicious transactions, certain this would ruin Damon and Rhonda. Despite my pleas, he refused to delete the files. "No forgiveness," he said, eyes cold. "They crushed my career. Now I'll watch them burn." My protests fell on deaf ears. He was too far gone. Days later, an anonymous tip reached local journalists, detailing financial discrepancies within Shane's former company. Rumors exploded online, stock prices dipped, and an internal audit began. Damon was suspended, and Rhonda faced serious scrutiny. Shane watched the fallout with a grim smile, as if justice were finally his. I felt sick, torn between horror at his methods and relief that the company might answer for unethical behavior. Yet, I worried for Shane's soul, seeing how revenge had eclipsed every other aspect of his life. Any affection we once shared was overshadowed by his relentless drive to hurt those he deemed enemies. Investigations revealed Damon had orchestrated fraudulent vendor contracts, siphoning funds while Rhonda turned a blind eye. Both were terminated. Legal action loomed for them, and the company suffered a blow to its reputation. Shane took it all in, triumphant, as though he'd scored a personal victory. But I saw no sign of relief in his eyes. He still paced restlessly, consumed by suspicion that someone would discover his hacking. Sometimes he'd stare at me as though I'd betrayed him simply by questioning his actions. Our relationship felt beyond repair, a casualty of the ruthless path he'd chosen for revenge. One evening, I confronted him, demanding he seek therapy, or at least consider the toll this crusade was taking on us. He scoffed, "I'm fine, I won." But he hadn't won anything that truly mattered. He'd lost his job, his professional reputation, and was close to losing me. "Don't you see what you're doing?" I cried. "They crossed a line," he replied. "I can't forgive that." He didn't understand forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about his own healing, but he was determined to remain bitter. I realized that the man I loved was drowning in anger, unwilling to surface. As the scandal deepened, the company's leadership was overhauled. Lawsuits stacked against Damon and Rhonda, overshadowing Shane's initial claims of retaliation. In a twisted turn, the public forgot about him. The press focused on corporate fraud, not the meltdown that started it all. "They've stolen my narrative," he fumed. "I should be seen as the hero who exposed them." I tried pointing out how his life might finally regain stability without the spotlight. He scoffed, calling me naive. He was still sleeping on the couch, still refusing to plan our wedding, still convinced everyone had betrayed him. I felt helpless. Late one night, after another argument, Shane announced he was leaving. "Clearly, you don't support me," he snarled, stuffing clothes into a duffel bag. I didn't stop him. The man I'd fallen in love with, proud, principled, caring, had vanished under layers of resentment. He slammed the door behind him, leaving me in a silent living room littered with legal papers and bitter memories. For weeks, I heard nothing. When mutual friends asked about him, I had no answers. My own grief was compounded by relief that the constant darkness was gone. I needed light, and I wouldn't find it with Shane. Months passed before I heard an update. A mutual friend mentioned Shane was couch surfing with an old colleague, obsessed with launching another lawsuit against the company for defamation. It never materialized. No lawyer wanted his case after the jury's verdict. He'd become a cautionary tale of unchecked pride and anger. Meanwhile, I cleaned up my life, attending therapy, focusing on work, and rediscovering joy. I recognized that I'd loved him deeply, but love alone couldn't heal a soul bent on destruction. The phone rang once, Shane rambling about how he'd find justice. I quietly ended the call, wishing him peace. I often wonder if he found solace in tearing others down, or if that bitterness eventually consumed him. Perhaps he wandered into another job, continuing the pattern of grudges. In truth, I no longer want vengeance on his behalf. I want freedom. From the anger, from the memory of betrayal, from the heartbreak of watching someone unravel. Our engagement lies in ashes, a reminder that respect for oneself can turn cruel when it abandons empathy. Let this stand as proof that no victory born of spite ever truly satisfies. Shane chose never to forgive. In doing so, he forgave himself nothing,